Welcome everybody to session 2 of Training Ninja's Power Hours. Today we're going to be looking at Milestone XProtect and how to set up smarter recording rules as well as storage within our management clients. So when we set up our systems, we can normally put our cameras into two separate groups. And for us to put the cameras into two separate groups, namely critical and non-critical, the reason why we would do that is because we want to ensure that not every camera follows the same recording strategy. We will have critical cameras on our sites and we will have non-critical cameras on our sites. So we need to set up rules that affect these groups. Looking at the critical cameras group, for that strategy, what we'll be doing is creating a continuous recording rule or a record always or 24/7. They're known by different names, but essentially that is where the customer has told us of his spec for frame rate. So it might be 12 frames, might be 25 frames, depending on your customer. And we want to record continuously because those cameras are generally considered to be monitoring high value areas. They can be cash counting, can be high value items within a warehouse. You'll know after having these discussions with your customer what are critical cameras for him. Then we've got non-critical cameras. So generally what we do with non-critical cameras, and what I've seen when I've gone to site to do site audits, is that people will set up motion detection. So when you add cameras to Milestone, automatically it gets set up on motion detection because we do server-side motion. But nobody ever goes into the cameras one by one to set up sensitivity, and that's what Milestone recommends. So we've all been there where we've had an incident and maybe the sensitivity hasn't been set high enough. And when we do playback to find the incident for the customer, either the incident wasn't triggered, so we didn't have any recording, or after the incident took place, maybe we've got half the incident because the motion detection only triggered halfway through the incident, something like that. So in order to stop that from happening, either we can increase the sensitivity on motion, or alternatively, what Milestone recommends is something called a video bump. And what a video bump is when we record at 1 frame a second. So we no longer have any blank spots in our footage. We're continuously recording at 1 frame a second. And then what we do when we pick up motion, we will bump up to all frames. Whether the customer wants 12 frames or 25 frames, we'll bump up the recording. So when he goes to playback, and let's say we hadn't set our motion sensitive enough, we would still at least have a single frame every second to try and make out what happened. Rather some footage than no footage. Right, so looking at how we're going to achieve that, we need to work with something in Milestone called rules, their rule engine. This is how we program the system to meet our customers' requirements, because no two customer systems will operate in the same way. And what we'll do is we'll look at two rules. One, where we do the continuous recording rule, and that's going to be a time-based rule. And the second one is we're going to have a trigger called motion detected, which is going to bump us up. Now, the only thing that I want to point out on this page is that we have two types of triggers that can trigger our rules in Milestone. It's either going to be time-based or it's going to be event-based. Okay, and an event-based is essentially motion detected, and input triggered, maybe, for example, an AI analytic triggered, that type of thing. Right, so I think without further ado, let's get into actually designing our system or working on our management client. Okay, so here we are in our smart client. We've got a customer called Truck and Deer HQ. They've got two cameras, a construction camera and a kennel camera. The first thing we want to do, the customer's requirement might have been to keep the critical cameras for a longer time period. Let's say, for example, 30 days, and maybe the non-critical cameras for 14 days. So how we would do that is we would click on our recording server, make sure we've clicked on the storage tab. I'll show you a little cheat. What we can do is just rename local default. This is the default location that when you first installed Milestone pops up. So we're going to call this non-critical storage. And if you want to adjust the storage, you can double click on the blue and you'll see that it's recording to the F media database. Customer's requirement might have been, like I said, 14 days and let's say 2 terabytes. Okay. We have a pop-up that pops up about GDPR compliance. Anything longer than 7 days might be considered too long, but please take that up with your legal team of what you guys are happy with. So we've created a non-critical storage. Now we go create our critical storage. We click on the green button and we're going to choose our recording path. Let's say G this time, not F, media database. Customer wants it for, let's say, 28 days and let's say 10 terabytes. Okay, GDPR pops up again and we're going to accept that. Now notice that there is nothing under critical storage. So in order for us to move our critical cameras to that location, we go pick the camera, we go to the storage or the record tab, should I say, and we change the storage location. So we click select and then we go click critical storage. We get another pop-up that appears, and now this pop-up is telling us that Milestone is not going to move the current footage or the previous footage. Okay, we will start recording in the new location, so which is critical storage. However, when your operators do playback and we've still got footage in the old location that hasn't been overwritten, we will play back from both locations. So it will be seamless for your operators. However, the old footage in the old location will eventually be overwritten first in, first out by the other cameras recording to that location. So in future, all of your footage will eventually reside on the critical storage location. So there's nothing you have to do. You can just select OK. Great. So now we've moved that camera across. Now just to double check, if I go to recording server and I click on the storage tab, you'll notice that I've got one device. It says over here 14 devices. I don't want you to worry about that. Those 14 devices that got picked up are all the disabled components of that hardware. So right now we've only got one camera stream coming in that we're using. So I'm just going to unclick hide again. So now that we've got our storage set up and our critical camera is recording for 28 days and our non-critical camera 14 days, what's the next thing we need to do? So we need to set up rules, but rules ideally work the best with groups. So let's go and set up our camera groups. We go set up cameras. Well, we go to cameras. Now, when I first added the cameras, I added the cameras to an all cameras group. So let's create two groups, one critical and one non-critical. Okay. So once you've created the groups, the next thing to do is to move the cameras into the group. So we can do that by right-clicking, saying edit. Once we've edited the group, we can open up our all cameras group and we can move our non-critical kennels camera across. You see it now populates. Let's do the same thing with critical. So right-click, edit, open up all cameras, move the construction camera across, and it is now moved across. I want you to notice that a camera can belong to more than one group. Okay, so this has its advantages and its disadvantages. And the main disadvantage is that if you set up rules and they're conflicting rules, so maybe one rule applies to one group and you've got another rule which is the opposite applying to another camera group, and that camera belongs to both, you're going to have that camera switching between the different rules. So the last rule to trigger will take precedence. So avoid that. But we can do an audit to find those type of things. So now that we've got our critical cameras sorted, let's go and, or our group sorted, should I say, let's go to our rule engine. So we click on rules. Now looking at our rule engine, we've got 8 default rules, and these default rules make Milestone work. Okay, so if I look at the default record on motion rule, it's saying perform an action on motion started from all cameras. Start recording 3 seconds before, so that's a pre-record. So when it picks up motion, fetch the first 3 seconds before the motion, then carry on recording. When motion has stopped, stop recording 3 seconds after the motion has stopped. So that is a rule, that is a default rule in Milestone. When we add cameras, I'm going to show you quickly. When we add cameras to Milestone, if we go to the motion tab, you will notice, I've actually turned this off by default, they will all be on, looking at the kennels tab as well, is that by default, they all record on motion, server-side motion. So our CPU is analyzing every keyframe and looking for movement. And when there's movement, it will start recording. Okay, so if you turn or delete these rules, so let's say if I go and delete this rule, well, then the system is not going to record. There's a start feed rule. So if I delete that, then the system is not going to send any camera streams. So what you want to do is be very careful. You don't want to delete. Milestone's best practice is to always disable a rule. Now, because we are going to have rules affecting recordings, we are going to go ahead and disable this rule rather than delete it. Okay. So once that rule has been disabled, all of your cameras will stop recording. Okay, so the next thing to do is now to start creating those rules. Let's make that record continuously or record always rule. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to say add. And now Milestone's naming, best naming practice is considered to be, or not considered to be, but you always start the rule off with what it is going to affect. And this rule is going to affect recording. So I'm going to call it the record always rule. And this rule will be time-based. It will not be event-based. So we're going to use time to trigger this rule. So I'm going to go and click on time interval, click next. There's the always option over there. So I'm going to select always. Then next, I want to start recording on the devices immediately. And I want to choose what devices must start recording. So I'm going to choose our critical cameras and I'm going to add. And I'm going to click OK. So start recording immediately on critical cameras, perform an action when time interval ends, stop recording. So when will always end? It will never end. So if I click finish, we now have a record always rule. Now to verify that the record always rule is working, we can always go back to cameras and you'll see a red dot on our critical cameras. That means that that camera is recording. If we look at our rule, it literally said start recording immediately. It's got nothing to do with frames. So Kurt, what frame rate is that camera recording at? And if we go to cameras and we look at our construction camera, and it's got multiple streams, it's an axis camera. So to verify what streams we're using, we can look at streams. We're using stream 1 for live and for recording. So we go look at our settings at stream 1. And we can see we've got frames per second over here at 8. So that means that this camera is recording at 8 frames a second. So your customer requirement, depending what you chatted with your customer, in our case, let's say it's 12 frames a second. We are now going to up the frame rate. So it now starts recording at 12 frames a second at 1920 by 1080, which is 2 megapixel. Right, so we've now sorted our continuous recording for our critical cameras, and it's recording to its storage location of critical storage. So the next thing to do is to now go and create a rule that gets us recording at 1 frame a second for our non-critical cameras. Remember, it's called the video bump rule. We want to go continuously record at 1 frame a second and then bump up to all frames. Now, in order to do that, we need to go to Kennel's camera. Okay. And we need to look at 2 things. One, we need to find out which stream is being used for live and recording. So click on streams. We can see we've got stream 1 also being used. Now, the frames per second is currently set to is 25 frames and per second. Another thing I want you to take notice of is that we've got this thing called max frames between keyframes. Okay, so what does that mean? The way that H.264, MPEG-4, H.265 work, and I explained it in session 1, is that they are sequence-based encoding or sequence-based compression. And what happens is we take a full frame, which we call a keyframe, and then we analyze it, and instead of keep on taking multiple frames, we just have a look at the keyframe, and if anything's changed, we just overlay those pixels onto the keyframe. That's called a reference frame. Now, because this says 8, it means we're going to have 8 reference frames before we take a new keyframe. So let me explain it to you on this image that I've got popped up on the screen. So you'll see that the axis camera was originally set up to 8 frames a second, 30 keyframes, okay? Or sorry, 30 reference frames. And then the Hikvision was set up to 25 frames per second and 8 reference frames. So we want to ensure that we take 1 keyframe every second. So if I take 8 divided by 30, that means that that axis camera is sending less than 1 frame a second. Okay, in fact, it's only sending 1 frame every 3.75 seconds. And if we look at the Hikvision camera, which is now our kennel camera, sorry, I forgot to mention the axis is the construction camera. The Hikvision camera is recording at 25 frames with 8 reference frames, which is this one. Well, if you look at the right bottom of your screen, you'll see it there. And that's 3.1 frames every second. Okay, so why am I telling you this? If we go to the record tab, let me show you. If we go to the record tab on our Hikvision, which is our kennels camera, you'll have this option here to record keyframes only. So if I click this now as is, that means that I'll be recording 3.25 or 3.75 frames every second with the way that this GOP or group of pictures has been set up. If I change the GOP, so let's go back and we change this to, first we change the frame rate to 12 because we know our customer wanted 12 frames a second. And then we change the max frames between keyframes to 12. Okay. And you might want to change default. You'll just have to test it to custom. Okay. That means that if 12 divided by 12, that's 1 frame every second. So one other thing I need to mention to you is that when we do motion detection on Milestone, we do it per keyframe. So previously we were doing motion detection every 3 frames every second. And that means the motion detection would probably be more accurate. Okay, but you would also be using more CPU power for the motion detection. With us dropping it to 1 frame a second, it will be less accurate, but we'll be able to, it will be less accurate and we'd be using less CPU. So just be very careful with playing with your GOP. You can obviously read up on it. You can ask me or we can ask Milestone what they recommend. But to get our 1 frame per second, we'll have, as I've set up now, 12 frames per second and 12 keyframes. And then we go to record and we click on this record keyframes only and we click save. So that means that now when we start recording on this camera, it is going to record at 1 frame per second. So how are we going to set this camera to record? Well, you guessed it. We go click on rules. On the record always rule, we'll right click and we'll say edit. And now we want to add that non-critical cameras group. So let's go click on critical cameras. Now we can choose our non-critical cameras group and click add and click OK and click finish. So what's now happening if we go back to cameras and we should see a red dot over here, you can see that it is that it is recording now and it will be recording at 1 frame per second. Sorry, I forgot to turn off my phone. Okay, so another thing that I need to mention is that for the critical cameras, if I go and look under motion, motion is enabled. Okay, but why do we have motion enabled if we're recording always at full frame rate? Okay, well, the full frame rate for us was 12 frames a second. And the answer is you must, or Milestone recommends we must turn this off because you are using CPU power for nothing. We're analyzing the image, we're sending an instruction to Milestone that we've picked up motion detection, start recording, and Milestone says, hang on, we're already recording always, so ignore that. And that CPU power can be saved. Okay, so you had a bottleneck, and by unchecking it, we no longer have a bottleneck. On our non-critical camera, should we uncheck that as well? No, because a video bump rule requires motion detection so we can bump up to full frames. So let's go and set that up in our rules. So I'm going to right click and I'm going to add a rule. And what is this rule going to affect? It's going to affect our frame rate. So that is what we're going to put there. Then we're going to say non-critical cameras or frame rate. Let's, I don't know, say frame rate bump. Non-critical cameras. Okay, and it's going to be event based. So I'm going to click on events, and you can find the server-side motion detection under predefined events. You scroll down and you see motion started. So when we detect motion, what do we want to do? We want to select the non-critical camera group. So when we detect motion with any cameras in this group, what do we want to do? Well, we don't want it to happen during a certain period or outside a certain time. We want it to always trigger, so we're not going to put anything there. And it is a ready recording. So the action we want to take, we don't want to click on start recording. Okay, it's a ready recording. We want to find an action that says set recording frame rate to all frames for MPEG-4, H.264, and H.265. So we've got that selected. I'm now going to select next. Now, when motion stopped, drop it back down to 1 frame, but maybe we want to keep it going a bit longer just in case. And if we click next, we can click on immediately and we can do a post record. And you can set this up to whatever you feel is right for you and your customer. I'm going to set it up at 15 seconds so that once motion stopped, carry on recording at all frames for 15 seconds after. And I'm going to click finish. So now I've got that camera or non-critical cameras belonging to 2 groups. Okay, so we'll record continuously at 1 frame a second, and then we'll bump up to all frames. And you might tell me, Kurt, what is all frames? Well, if we go back to our cameras and we go look at our non-critical camera, remember we set that camera up to 12 frames. So that is all frames for this camera. If we change it to 25, it will be 25. Okay, just remember, always remember the GOP, the time between keyframes. Okay, because if you change that and you don't change that, what will happen is if you've still got keyframes only, well, you might be recording less than 1 frame a second, or you might be recording more than 1 frame per second. Okay, do your calculations, speak to your Milestone reps, or you can send me an email. Glad to help you out. Okay, so now we have set those up. So that is how we set up our 2 rules and how we've now created 2 different recording scenarios for critical and non-critical cameras. The next thing I would do, and I'd always recommend, is once you've finished with your rules, always make sure you right click and say validate rules. And it's working. Fantastic. Now, I've gone to sites where I've had customers who have a lot of cameras, a lot of administrators, and maybe one administrator was responsible for creating the critical and non-critical camera rule. And then over a couple of years, or maybe after a couple of months, maybe he gets replaced, or maybe somebody else comes into the system. So Milestone recommends always taking a backup of your system. And to take a backup, file, configuration, backup. And the reason for that is because look what happens. Let's say I come in and now I've been given the mandate to go and put cameras into groups with proper names. Maybe they haven't been named correctly, or reorganize the cameras. And I see non-critical, critical cameras. I'm going to just delete this. I'm going to carry on creating groups. Now look what happens when I've deleted that group. If I go and find that camera under the recording server, it's no longer recording. Okay, there's no warning that's popped up. Your customer doesn't know the camera's recording unless you've got smart operators who are looking for that red dot. And if you go to rules now and you right click on validate all rules, it's going to give you an error. It says rules have not been validated. And why have they not been validated? So if I go to frame bump, it says deleted or restricted device group. So you have 2 options in this scenario. One, you can go ahead and restore your configuration back up, which is the easiest and quickest option. The second option is to now you have to go and recreate that group. So if I go and right click and create the we had a critical camera group, and I've got to go and add that Kennels camera again. Okay. Notice that it still doesn't have the red dot, because when you delete groups and re-add groups, Milestone assigns them a new ID. So going back to our rules, it still shows as deleted, even if it's got the same name as the previous deleted groups. So you have to right click, you have to click edit, and you click on deleted or restricted device group. and we would put non-critical camera group there, and we'd click on deleted or restricted, put non-critical camera there, go and say finish. Okay, so our frame bump rule is working. Let's do another validate just to make sure. Okay, there we go. So it says we forgot something on record always. So again, record always, remember we had added that second non-critical cameras group. So let's edit it, right click and edit, and add non-criticals or non-critical cameras. Great. And let's say validate, they pass. Let's go look at our camera. Is it recording? And it is recording. So that is how you validate your rules and how you follow Milestone's best practices of always taking a backup of your system whenever you are doing maintenance or whenever somebody's going to plan work on the system. So it should be part of your change control. Before change control, always make sure you take a system backup. Okay, so from a professional service side at Training Ninja, we offer system audits to make sure that your system has been installed to global standard and spec as per Milestone's recommendation. And that's for end users or for integrators. And we do that remote or on site. We also provide integrator support, commissioning assistance. So please feel free to reach out to us. And again, that is also on site or off site. I've got my email address below. And I think that's it for our second session of Power Hours. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or get in contact, but it's been a pleasure teaching you, and I will see you guys for session number 3 in the next 2 weeks.